This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry, is brought to you by Case IH.
Coming up on This Week in Agribusiness, farmers from around the country and around the world gathered in Grand Island, Nebraska for Husker Harvest Days. Hello everyone, thanks for joining us for This Week in Agribusiness. I'm Mike Pearson in the studio this week, but we are going to be taking our cameras out to Husker Harvest Days. Max Armstrong had the chance earlier this week to head out to Grand Island, Nebraska, where big crowds gathered for 3 spectacular weather days, looking at cattle, new equipment, and everything else over at Husker.
Oh yes, Mike, at this largest totally irrigated outdoor working farm show, Husker Harvest Days, water is a big topic of discussion every year, but certainly this year, in a year when the rains have been uncertain and farmers have had to supplement the water for their crops in this part of the world. We talked about it with Jason Libby. He's the site manager for Husker Harvest Days.
Oh, it all starts out, after the show, we have a post-mortem meeting and we do some planning. Fine-tune some things, if we want to change some things, add some stuff. I work with the local farm manager with this ground. We'd lay out the crops, days, variety, all that good stuff, and just try to make the show better. Like to change things every once in a while.
What was added for the 2023 edition?
It's basically a lot of chemical trials and stuff. Nitrogen stabilizers, all that stuff. And we did some drone work out here, and it's got some ride and drives. There's just a lot of things going on the show site this year that we've added.
It's hard to miss the permanent structures out here. It seems like they continue to grow on this site.
Yes, Chief made a major expansion. They moved actually lots, and it's a mini farmstead in the middle of a farm show. House, shop, grain bins, ethanol division, trucking division, everything Chief has to offer.
You take a look back at this growing season, it sure did have its share of challenges. It was a tough one, especially early.
Yeah, we started out here working powder. It was really dry this spring. Planted, probably made 4 or 5 circles with pivots before the corn even came up. And it came up real nice, and then the Mother Nature just shut the spigot off, and I bet I made probably 22, 23 circles out here with pivots.
That many?
Yes. Yeah, we got shut off real early, had a real dry spell there for a while.
Several of the farmers we've spoken to across the Corn Belt say it's a reasonably decent corn crop for what it's been through. Would you hear that from some of the growers here?
Yeah, I would say, from what I see of the averages for as long as we've been doing this, it's 18, 20 moisture corn. That's making 225 to 235 in spots, which is about average for, a 95 to 100 day corn for this area.
The show has been around 45 years. You've been here for about half that, I understand.
Well, my dad's been out here for 38, and I was just a little pipsqueak at 13 or 14, and then I took the demos over about 10 years ago, 12 years ago, and now I took over his role, and he's going to enjoy life a little bit.
So, Mike, just as generations of farm families have attended Husker Harvest Days, a couple of generations of a family have been involved in helping manage this show over the years, too. There's some big numbers involved with Husker Harvest Days. 4 center pivot companies have 7,600 feet of spans at this show, center pivot spans. And at the same time, the grain storage capacity here amounts to about 75,000 bushels. Oh, one more set of numbers for you, Mike. Next year's show, Husker Harvest Days, get it on your calendar, September 10th through the 12th. I know you want to write that down, Mike.
Yes, Max, I've got those down. September 10th, 11th, and 12th, 2024, Grand Island, Nebraska for the 46th Husker Harvest Days. Before we get to Husker Harvest Days next year, however, we've got a lot of legislative action in Congress that needs to get finished. There's some work happening with livestock disaster payments, and there's a farm bill. Patrick Haggerty spoke with John Hoven, North Dakota's senior senator, about these issues.
Well, Senator Tester and I have introduced some legislation that I think would be very helpful, particularly in the cattle industry, but for livestock. So we're introducing it as standalone legislation, or we have introduced it, but we also are looking at, of course, getting it incorporated in the Farm Bill. And so when you look at programs like the Livestock Indemnity Program and the Livestock Forage Program and ELAP, Emergency Livestock Assistance Program, we really are working to strengthen those programs and include those programs in the Farm Bill so that we don't have to have as much ad hoc disaster, when we have blizzards or, other types of natural disasters. So I think we've made good progress there, and I think for the livestock industry, that's going to be very important, some of those changes that we're making, combined with working to get them more transparency and, of course, competition to improve pricing. And that includes things like the cattle contract library, which I was able to get passed as a pilot program, making that a permanent program, and doing other things with LMR and so forth to make sure that there's good transparency there when it comes to AMAs and other things that are very important to our cattle producers, but to get them, better competition, better pricing in the market.
We're not going to make September 30th. Are we going to have a farm bill in October or November? Did you bring your crystal ball with you? Can you tell me when we're going to have a farm bill?
So we have to get Title I right. And it's really important, and we're, we should and we'll talk about some of those concepts, but that's the first priority. And until we get Title I right, to me, that's going to dictate the timing. Now, I think we need extensions right now so that our producers have certainty. As you know, some of the programs expire September 30, but the larger, more important programs expire at calendar year end. Right. And we need to make sure that nobody's out there guessing. They know that that support network's going to be there as they plan for next year. But the timing, in my opinion, will be dictated by how fast we get Title I on the right track and know that we're going to have something that works for our producers.
Thank you, Patrick. Folks, that was John Hoeven, senior Republican senator from the state of North Dakota, looking ahead to the issues that could impact agriculture from a policy perspective in D.C. This portion of This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Firestone Ag. The Firestone Ag Dealer Network offers you the support, inventory, and resources you need. Visit firestoneag.com to find your local certified dealer. It's been a busy week in the commodity markets, and joining us now to discuss it is Ted Seifert, Chief Market Strategist with Zaner Ag Hedge. Ted, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Mike. Glad to be here.
We have the World Agricultural Supply and Demand Estimates released this week from USDA. The corn market was watching two key pieces of information. We were watching acreage, we were watching yield. Ted, how'd the report come out on the corn front?
Okay, so yield didn't come down quite as much as what the average trade guess was, and you get the feeling that it didn't come down nearly as much as what a lot of the trade would have liked to see. And acreage came in higher than expected. So that corn production number did not come in significantly lower. In fact, it just actually crept up just ever so slightly. And so did our carryover, right? So that was a kind of a miss there. In particular on acreage, that was a miss by the trade analysts or the guesses. And it's really tough to get terribly excited in corn with a 2.21 billion or 2.221 billion bushel carryover. It's almost burdensome, right? And for the fact that the USDA didn't increase any sort of demand on a slightly higher production number, that's not really sitting well either. So the question really is, can we regrow some of that demand going forward? And what do we have to do that? Is that going to mean, well, lower prices are going to find that demand? So yes, the concern is that there could be more downside potential here for the corn market in the relatively short term.
We're going to have combines moving here very shortly across much of the Corn Belt, Ted, for growers who could be undersold given the variability of this season's weather. How do you handle that December corn marketing? Yeah,
and I think that whether you're undersold or not, you might have to find out as you're combining, right? So, downside buying puts is not a bad idea. If you are really rather sold, there's the idea of the insurance hedge to hedge the upside on a rally, although current fundamentals don't really suggest there's a whole lot of upside for the corn market at the moment. So making cash sales, hedge to arrive, using puts, lots of different ways to hedge that downside, but I think now it's sort of imperative. The USDA said pretty loud and clear that yield isn't coming down too dramatically between now and the final. I mean, the September variance between the September and the final yield isn't all that much. So the fact that they did not lower that yield dramatically is a call to action. You guys need to start looking at hedging the downside at this point.
Given that there isn't maybe a lot of bullish narrative on the horizon, Ted, or are you also looking at December 24, still north of 5, last I checked this week?
Yeah, right. And it just clinging on right at that $5 mark, and even 25 at around $4.90. Yeah, I really do think so. Because, this is all, we go in cycles. And we've spent a lot of time towards the higher end of the range over the past few years. At some point, production, and not just us, from Brazil, from South America, from everywhere in the world, it really comes out of the woodwork. And we're seeing it happen in Brazil right now. And eventually we'll be back to the same story that we were talking about in 16, 17, 18, 19, which is we're oversupplying the market. We can't grow demand fast enough. We're going back to those times at some point here. And you worry that unless there's a major problem in South America growing season this year, we might be heading there sooner than later. So yes, I really do want people to be looking at least 15 to 30% of DEES 24 and even start maybe looking at 25.
You mentioned the Brazilian weather, Ted. How's it shaping up so far this early in the growing season?
Yes. So generally speaking, they're not really allowed to plant till mid-September. Their government doesn't allow them to do that. But because they had really good subsoil moisture, good rains during their dry seasons going into planting, and they're a little bit worried about that second season corn crop with El Nino, they're getting that soybean crop in early, which could be a problem for us. It could shorten our export window if they're harvesting 2 to 3 weeks early.
All right, we'll have a lot to talk about when it comes to the soybean market, folks. Stay with us. More with Ted Seifert from Zaner Ag Hedge here when This Week in Agribusiness returns. This portion of This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Firestone Ag. Harvey Firestone invented the first pneumatic farm tire, forever changing what it means to farm hard. Visit firestoneag.com to learn more about this history and tire solutions for today. Welcome back. We're discussing the markets with Ted Seifert, the Chief Market Strategist at Zaner Ag Hedge. And Ted, you mentioned soybeans there as we went into break. We did see some adjustments to the U.S. soybean yield on this report. They brought it down a touch, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. It was a little bit lower, slightly lower, just 1/10 of a bushel below the average trade guesses. Acreage didn't come up quite as much, though, so those are kind of offsetting factors. The trade took the soybean report fairly bearish, but I'm going to say that soybean report had a little something for everyone. One, that yield coming down a little bit more than expected. You can make the argument that will continue to come down and continue to put pressure on supply, and that maybe the USDA won't be justified in lowering demand any further. On the other side of that, you're going to have some people say that, okay, the fact that the USDA was able to lower exports by 35 million bushels and crush by 10 million bushels, and for the fact that with a lower production number, we still had a ending stocks number that was above the average trade guess of 207. It came in at 220. That's where the negativity came from. The willingness that the USDA has to cut demand, that might be a bit of a concern for some people going forward. I think that's why the market reacted that way. The concern that I have, like we said, is if Brazil's planting early and they're going to be harvesting earlier, that can cut short our export window by 2 to 3 weeks. On top of the problems that we're having with the river now and for the foreseeable future, at least the next 3 weeks or so, we're going to have trouble getting these new beans down to the ports that are sort of they don't have beans right now, at least not in a big way. So that could really crimp our export window on the front side. So if we lose roughly a month of our export window, that's a pretty sizable amount of bushels, and that does justify the USDA lowering that export number. So that's the concern that I have going forward, and I think you really saw that happen in the market after that number came out there on Tuesday.
Ted, you mentioned the concerns, this high price bringing in acres from around the globe. Do we have a sense as to how many additional acres they could put in the ground in Brazil this season?
Man. Yeah, so generally speaking, the consensus is between 8 to 10% is what they're looking for. Yeah, it's big, and they continue to grow. They continue to take Cerrado and put it into. It's not taking the rainforest out, right? I mean, that's the old narrative. Now it's pasture, basically. What we did with our growing area, but they have a lot more of that to go. So yeah, Brazil's a monster. They're going to continue to grow. They're going to continue to push yields, and they're going to continue to really push the export market and get more of that global market share.
All right, Ted, turning the focus over to livestock for a moment. We've continued to see live cattle stay in near record territory, touching contract highs here in the last week, 10 days. We're coming up on the end of summer, the end of the grilling season. Where do you see cattle going from here?
Yeah, I'd like to think that there is still more upside potential in cattle and that we can break through to new highs and then take another leg higher. However, man, we've been up here for so long, it feels like we have to do that in the next 10 days or so. If we don't, you're going to start seeing a bit of a drop-off, maybe a deeper correction, because we're kind of getting to the time frame, like you said, end of the grilling season. We have a little bit of a lull in demand between now and when we get into the holiday season. So that means box beef prices could come down, cash cattle prices could soften a little bit if we can't get that excitement going in the market. So you want to see breakout to new highs, a close above new highs, and then you can feel good about it. But if that doesn't happen in the next 2 weeks, I think we have to get worried a bit of downside correction.
Get worried, maybe get aggressive on getting some of that risk management in place. Folks, we've been talking with Ted Seifert, Chief Market Strategist at Zaner Ag Hedge. Ted, as always, thanks for joining us this week.
Pleasure's mine, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Colby Ag Tech is brought to you by Copperhead Ag Products. Visit copperheadag.com for more information. Well, folks, some of you might have heard that Apple released several new devices this past week. I can tell you that news did not sneak past our own Chad Colby, who joins us this week with an update on that technology.
I had to show you the highlights from a couple big product releases at Apple's launch this past week. First, the new watch has got a new processor, which enables it to have all-day battery life, 18 hours. And when you look at the new display on top of that watch, not only is it go out to the edge a little bigger, but get this, it's twice as bright as the old model. Now's a perfect time if you've got a watch that's a few years old. There's a lot to talk about in the technology. This watch, as well as the Ultra 2 model, has a new gesture control, which is really impressive, but this Ultra watch is really loaded with features. Longer battery, of course, taking advantage of that new processor. And that gesture control, look at this. You just double tap your fingers. It's impressive. As far as the phone goes, we've got to talk about the new iPhone 15. And in all of my years looking at Apple phones, I've used every one. There's nothing like it. iPhone 15 comes in many different colors, as you can see here, those two traditional sizes, a standard size if you would, and a plus size. I prefer that larger size. When you look at just the standard iPhone model, it is a major upgrade, especially the camera, the processor. Battery life is improved. Of course, it does have USB Type-C now. That's different. Better chip, all those kind of things. The Pro model, that's where things really get out of hand in terms of cell phone performance. The same two sizes, of course, an improved camera. And the camera is truly second to none in a smartphone. It essentially has 7 different lenses in it, and I can't wait to use it. What I've seen here this past week since launch is really impressive. This phone is driven by a new processor, the most powerful ever in any smartphone, and I can't wait to get my hands on it. They went on sale this past Friday, and you can bet we'll have more about it here very soon. For This Week in Agribusiness, I'm Chad Colby.
Well, thank you, Chad, for that update. But I tell you what, I kind of like the fact that people can't send me a message here on my old-fashioned watch. That's Chad Colby with our look at tech for This Week in Agribusiness.
Closed captioning for This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Pentair Hi-Pro, a global leader in innovative spray technology for farmers for over 75 years.
At the Husker Harvest Show this past week, Max had a chance to talk with one of the anchors of that show, DJ Ihusen, the third generation to leave the Chief Industries family.
We're elated with the new site that we have here at Husker Harvest Days. We tripled the size of our exhibition space here. I guess you could say we're all in on this one at Husker Harvest Days. If you would have been here 8 weeks ago, this was just a bare dirt lot, and to see what we have now is something that is incredible, a tremendous effort by many, many people.
There is representation here from various divisions of your company, correct?
Yeah, one of the things we wanted to do was to really exemplify who we are as a company, our capabilities. Our previous lot didn't allow us to do that. This lot does. It shows what we're labeling as the all-American farm. It's your house, your storage shed, your grain storage, material handling, conditioning, you name it. And that's what Chief does. We really speak to the ag industry, and that's on display out here at Husker Harvest Days.
You pretty much have stayed within the agriculture space, have you not ventured out into other industries?
You know, we really have. I think when you look at our roots and you see who we are today, we are an ag company, make no mistake about it. We're based right here in Nebraska, and even though we've evolved and we've grown our business, we've always stayed to those roots. It's who we are.
The roots, you mentioned that a couple of times. A family business?
Family business. I'm the third generation to have had the opportunity to lead this company. We'll be celebrating 70 years in business this coming next year, so we're very excited about that. Understand the difficulties in getting that accomplished, and for all the hard work and effort by so many people in getting that accomplished.
BJ, I can imagine there are times you hear your heirs, your ancestors' voices in your head. You hear those who've gone before you as you're leading this company and what they've shared that you perhaps administer and carry out in your business.
Yeah, it's a real obligation. It's a dedication, if you will, and really something that drives me. Interestingly enough, our founder, my grandfather, was instrumental in getting Husker Harvest Days here to this site 45 years ago, I believe, this year. So part of why we're also doing this enhanced site is to pay respect to that and to really just to pay homage to all the efforts that he put into getting that accomplished 45 years ago.
Every good company is built on good people. No doubt you have had over those 70 years some very fine people in your ranks working for you.
Yeah, we make no mistake about it. A company is a collection of people, and the success of that company is solely predicated on those people. And it's the stakeholders of our company, our customers, our employees, our community that we reside on, our suppliers, all of those things go into the effort in being in business for 70 years.
One can't help but think of the crosswinds that buffet a company like yours over 70 years. Things no less important than the cost of steel, for example, the raw materials, the challenges of getting the labor that you need, the peaks and troughs of the farm economy. You've weathered all of that.
Boy, I think you nailed every single one of them. Those are all challenges, hurdles, or opportunities, depending on how you look at it. But we've weathered those throughout those years, and we'll continue to do so as we move forward.
Thank you, Max. That was DJ Ihusen, the third generation to lead that Chief Industries family. That Chief Industries lot was also the place to talk biofuels at Husker Harvest Days. Our friends from the Renewable Fuels Association were on hand with a new vehicle that could be the future of transportation. Joining us now is Troy Breedenkamp, Senior Vice President of Government Affairs. Troy, fill us in. What did you guys have on display at Husker?
Mike, good to be with you. We were excited to be at Husker Harvest Days. As a Husker, I always feel bad because I'm stuck back here in Washington, D.C., but we had a great display out there with our new member, Chief Ethanol. And what we were displaying was what we call the first ever plug-in hybrid flex fuel vehicle in the world. Believe it or not, those two technologies have never been combined. So we had to do it ourselves. We took a plug-in hybrid and we put a flex fuel vehicle conversion kit on it. It's been up and running for about 25,000 miles. We're getting great results with that vehicle. And we really do believe that it marries the best of both worlds. It does a battery transportation for the first 30 or so miles, but when you want to go to grandma's house, you could put in E85 and use that to get to grandma. And so it's a great vehicle. We hope that the auto manufacturers pick up our lead and start developing that kind of technology to go along with everything else.
What was the response from the farmers? What have you heard? Troy, does this look like a technology they could be excited about?
Well, I think they can. You know, once you get past the point of why is there an electric vehicle parked at a ethanol display, once you get the chance to explain to them what you're doing with that vehicle, they really do start getting excited. I think everyone understands that a battery electric vehicle, all battery, no internal combustion engine, is not where we want to be long term. It just doesn't seem to be sustainable from a rare earth mineral perspective. You just don't have the resources. But this would combine some battery technology with very good liquid fuel technology, and that would be a renewable biofuel. That is, what we're seeing, Mike, is numbers that are 50% to 70% less carbon emissions, less particulate matter emissions, and less NOx emissions coming out of our vehicle versus what it would from a conventional vehicle. So we're excited about this. We're making sure that USDA, EPA, Congress knows that this vehicle is out there, that it's performing well.
Well, I'm glad to hear that story is being told. Folks, that was Troy Breedenkamp, Senior Vice President at the Renewable Fuels Association. Stay here for more This Week in Agribusiness after this.
This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry, is brought to you by Case IH.
Welcome back to This Week in Agribusiness. This past growing season has seen weather challenges across the United States, and that's really put some added focus on what it takes to develop these genetics. Recently, Max had a chance to visit Research Triangle in North Carolina to talk with our friends from BASF about their seed portfolio. He had the chance to talk with Brian Perry, who's the head of seeds at BASF, and they talked about what's coming from that company.
Well, give us an overall view of the seed portfolio.
It's three main crops when you think cotton, canola, and soybean. and each one's at a different stage. So if I start maybe with canola, our Invigor franchise just celebrated its 25th birthday a year ago. And it's a really neat story how, BASF started that crop, and at one point had, no presence in the market. And today, Invigor's the market leader in North America, probably better part of 65 to 70% market share, all driven on innovation and performance and things that help growers out. And then our cotton franchise has two brands. So we have our Stoneville brand that you'd see predominantly in the eastern part of the U.S., celebrated its 100th birthday last year. And then our FiberMax brand that would be more of a Texas and western U.S. Brand that also had a birthday, 25 years last year. And then our baby, I called our baby Zetavo, our soybean business, in its third year, getting ready to go on its fourth year. So it's fun to have three core crops and all of them at a little different stage of where they're at in the market.
What would you say to growers about your approach to seed quality?
For us, you get one chance to plant. So you think about, well, when you pour that seed into the planter, it better have the highest quality. It really does matter, and it's a big commitment that we make to the seed that we produce and sell to farmers.
What steps are you taking to expand the portfolio, Brian?
Really, for BASF, our core is innovation, and you think about that R&D, and really there's two parts to R&D in the seed space. There'd be breeding, and I'd say that's a big focus for us to look at that, germplasm base, the yield quality. How do we bring something different to help growers? And there's trait research, and so BASF is one of only 4 companies that do basic, trait research, and so we're excited to look at new novel traits that we can bring to market to help, reduce stress, deal with pests, and just help growers grow better crops overall.
Where do you send farmers if they want more information about your seed offerings? Where's the best place to go?
We really encourage growers to go talk to their local ag retailer first. We've got a really strong commitment to working through the retail channel to actually distribute BASF seeds. The second would be if you have a relationship with your local BASF representative. It could be an ag solutions advisor or a business representative, because ultimately a lot of times those conversations are collaborative, right, with the ag retailer and with the BASF individual.
Thank you, Max. It's incredible to see what can come out of those research operations for these big companies. And folks, if you'd like to learn more about what BASF is doing out on farms, you can view all the videos in our Plan Smart Grow Smart series at plansmartgrowsmart.com.
Greg Solier now brings us his farm weather forecast for the week ahead, presented by Pivot BioProven 40. Predictable, productive, weatherproof. Turn to a better nitrogen. Turn to Pivot BioProven 40. Learn more at pivotbio.com.
Well, it's time to take a look at the forecast. And joining us now is meteorologist Greg Solier. Greg, taking a look at the Pacific Northwest, does it seem like things are going to get more active out there?
Yeah, signs of a significant moisture maker as the week wears on. And boy, some of those winter wheat fields into Washington State will certainly appreciate that. Winter wheat planting operations winding on down, but there's been an expansion of dryness and drought this summertime season into the northwestern reaches of the country. So here's the leading edge of this trough still offshore early in the week. There may be a couple of strong and severe storms as air up aloft begins to cool. Moisture in that frontal boundary make their way on inland. Meanwhile, across Big Sky country, the Dakotas, it's a return of very warm weather despite the calendar date. It'll have the feel of summertime briefly into the northern plains, but more so south and eastward as the week wears on. And speaking of which, here's a pretty impressive upper air buckle trough, if you will, across the Pacific Northwest. Yet as this time of the year, we had a couple of reports the past week to 10 days of the highest peaks across the Cascades and Northern Rockies, down towards Pikes Peak as well, of the season's first accumulating snowfall. So some of that through the Bitterroot chain. A bit of a cool off in temperature readings expected on the front side of this weather system. In some areas, a couple of strong and severe storms, but away from that, opportunities over the northwestern fringes of the Corn Belt for moisture reduction, dry down, and perhaps even a little bit of harvest in that single-digit completion mode on the corn side of things. Pretty lackadaisical, quiet weather pattern across the southwestern reaches of the country early in the week. Nothing going on in the tropical waters of the Pacific or off Baja like we've seen from time to time. Humidity in a summertime feel making its way back across Nebraska, points on southward through Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas. Hip, hip, hooray for last week's rainfall and drop-off in temperature readings. Long way to go once again before we get any significant improvement to the drought pattern here. There will be some heat and humidity and a couple of thunderstorm clusters here. Cooler air up across the northern plains, so this will be a pretty healthy weather maker for the plains with moisture on the increase. A couple of showers and thunderstorms across the desert southwest, even a stray shower out towards Napa. So action across the northwestern part of the country for this week, Mike.
Well, Greg, taking a look at the central part of the U.S., there does still seem to be that drought hanging on. Any rain coming in this next week?
Yeah, we've seen some expansion, some creep, some upward momentum on at least categorical worsening of dryness and drought over sections of the eastern Corn Belt. But again, it's the trade-off for harvest versus time to get recharged to the ground, and we'll be doing that balancing act over the western Corn Belt as the week wears on. Cooler air up across the Dakotas, a feel of late summertime with time across the eastern sections, and with this broad southwest to northeast upper level wind flow. Note how the winds of aloft have finally changed once the waters and tropical systems off the Atlantic have moved on out. Warm with low afternoon humidity, good moisture reduction for the eastern Corn Belt, and a cluster or two of showers and thunderstorms west of the Missouri. Some of those could be strong and severe, but again, we need the moisture in some of those worst drought areas from Nebraska, both north and south. Cooler air again, gone the 3-month heat wave across Texas and the Gulf Coast areas, and still some lingering shower activity. Long way to go to improve the drought down here. What is it? Some 75% of those pasture lands blowtorched, poor and very poor across Texas. Some heat across the Rio Grande and a couple of thunderstorm clusters as well. New frontal boundary with that western system may bring about some Gulf moisture. A couple of thunderstorms will take the moisture across the south end of the Plain States region. Humidity climbs, high pressure and control across the Delta region with, again, a pretty comfortable go of it with outdoor work and early harvest down there.
I know it's been active along the eastern seaboard. Greg, does that continue into next week?
Yeah, from Lee over the past 7 to 10 days, impressive wave action from the Outer Banks on southward. The last of Lee making its way out across the northern sections of the Atlantic. Boy, it was a pretty good hit over the weekend, and will continue to do so here over the back end of the weekend for sections of New England. But that's out to sea. Cooler, drier air for the Corn Belt, and the next weather system over the northern and western complex gets going with summer-like warmth here. Uptick in temperatures with low afternoon humidity over the eastern Corn Belt, back into cooler, drier weather for the northeastern states. The tropics, by the way, for the Gulf and the western Atlantic for now are quiet. Things are stalled out here along this frontal boundary with additional much-needed welcome rainfall across the Gulf Coast. High pressure for the Tennessee Valley. Wet weather continues here. Cooler, drier weather for the Tennessee Valley with heat and a couple of thunderstorms beginning to brew up over the south end of winter wheat.
Greg Solier is back with his extended farm weather forecast for the country, presented by Pivot BioProven 40. Predictable, productive, weatherproof. Turn to a better nitrogen. Turn to Pivot BioProven 40. Learn more at pivotbio.com.
Well, we're still talking weather. Greg Solier joins us. And Greg, next week, we've seen the activity that's coming. Who's going to get the rain?
Well, the Pacific Northwest, parts of the plains. It's this time of the year we do the old juggling act. Oh, we got to get the moisture in the ground. We got to get recharge going before frost and freeze and cold and wintertime and all that get going. Versus we've got harvest going on a little ahead of schedule. But again, it's been hastened by all the dryness and drought and hot temperatures over the western Corn Belt this summertime season. We move into the old fall equinox here a little before 2 in the morning next Saturday, the 23rd. And as the week wears on, it looks kind of wet for now, but this is a mid to late week setup over the western Corn Belt and back into the plains of a pickup on showers and thunderstorms, maybe an inch plus in some of those locales. That'll help the drought pattern, which has expanded again, some worsening into parts of the eastern complex late in the weekend towards the following weekend. A couple of showers and thunderstorms breaking out. Stalled frontal boundary will take the moisture here, drying out across areas of the northeast and New England. Some pretty good coverage moisture for the Pacific Northwest, northern and central Rockies, which will include on the higher peaks some snowfall, a couple of scattered showers and thunderstorms over the southwest. But Mike, it looks like those western areas of the Corn Belt and the plains will get significant moisture as the week wears on.
Well, let's take us into that next week. Greg, up to the first day of October, how do things shake out?
Temperature-wise here, look at the almost summer heat wave weather pattern. The hot ridge will be tracking this much of the fall season here. It's El Nino still into high overdrive, so temperature temperatures well above average here. Up past the Canadian border, some troughiness over the western part of the country. And with that, a bit of a below average trend in temperatures where weather systems will continue to track for Northern California. Welcome news of the Pacific Northwest, Northern and Central Rockies. Probably some snowfall as well in the higher peaks. Normal precip over much of the western Corn Belt. We can work with that with harvest in mind. Moisture reduction, dry down values pretty good here along with the heat over the eastern complex, and very much a dry weather pattern from Texas up into sections of the Northeast and New England into the Florida Panhandle as well.
Second full week in October. Greg, the 2nd through the 8th, what do you see?
A little bit of a subtle pattern shift here, a push of at least a lobe of some cooler air sweeping its way out of the Sioux into the Northeast and New England. The hot ridge for now. Talk about it in summertime a lot. This westward retrogression, it'll do just that into the plains and southwestern sections of the country from Florida's Panhandle into California, the Pacific Northwest. Otherwise, temperatures will continue above average. And the storm track is, again, easy to work with. Nothing out of control across many Corn Belt locales, at least normal precip for the Great Plains. Above average Oklahoma and Texas will take it down through Florida. Maybe the last vestiges of the Atlantic Basin still busy from a tropical weather standpoint. Above average moisture for the Pacific Northwest, drying out in the southwestern sections as well as Southern California.
Greg, does that heat stick around through the week of October 9th through the 15th?
We do, and it's El Nino. It's a moderate to strong one, and so there's a little piece of it still here, and we'll see it in greater detail on the longer range outlook here for the fall season coming on up. Temps a bit below average over this part of the country, a little troughiness over the sections of the west and Pacific Northwest, where we'll get to some moisture here. This is good news across California, northern and central plains, Corn Belt. We can work with this with harvest in mind. Maybe a little late season tropical system over the eastern Gulf into the northeast and New England. Above average rainfall. Much of Texas remaining high and dry.
Next on This Week in Agribusiness, it's Max's Tractor Shed, spotlighting another great American tractor.
We saw a couple of tractors restored this past summer that were sanded, painted, and decaled in just a matter of days. The owners were rushing to get those tractors ready for a show to have them done in time. You could smell the new paint on those tractors. Well, this wasn't one of them. It took years to restore it. Max's Tractor Shed is brought to you by Mystic Lubricants. Mystic Lubricants producers are made to make it last. Well, sometimes you look at an old tractor that needs restoring and you think, man, this is just going to take forever, but I'll keep plugging away at it. I'll make some time when I can and just restore that tractor as I can. For John Behrens at Hebron, Indiana, it took 3 winters to restore this tractor, as again, there were many other things on his schedule. John Behrens there came upon this nice little farm-all cub. It was only 73 years old when he started working on it. It's 76 years old now. John told me that he just kept working on it, and that can be the case as matters of life demand your attention. All right, the process can be a little more drawn out. But you know, I suppose it could be argued that after the restoration of that machine, perhaps it means a little more to you as you recall all of the other things that were going on in your life during those many months, that you patiently brought the beauty of a tractor back to life the way John Behrens did at Hebron, Indiana. Let's check in with Mark Stock now for his weekly report from Big Iron.
Well, hey, Max, great week at Husker Harvest Days. I want to thank everybody for stopping by and visiting with Big Iron. We have some Brown County, Illinois land selling to the highest bidder on Monday, September the 18th. 375 surveyed acres will sell in 5 tracts. On Tuesday, September the 19th, 103 acres will sell to the highest bidder in LaSalle County, Illinois. Also selling on Tuesday, September the 19th, 268 acres of Riley County, Kansas will sell in 4 tracts. On Thursday, September the 21st, 240 acres will sell in 2 tracts, land in Jefferson County, Iowa, for the John Mullane Estate. Friday, September the 22nd, 80 acres of tillable land will sell, land located in LaSalle County, Illinois, owned by MKM Oil, Inc. And we've also got the Russell Harder's estate sale on Tuesday, September the 19th. High quality equipment, folks, featuring a 2020 Case IH 6150 4-wheel drive combine. They've got a 2013 Case IH Steiger 400 heavy duty 4-wheel drive tractor, Case IH Magnum 275 mechanical front tractor, a Massey Ferguson 8480 mechanical front tractor. And on Wednesday, September the 20th, over 1,800 items sell Please pay attention to BigIron.com and SullivanAuctioneers.com.
Our FFA Chapter Tribute is brought to you by Pioneer, developing new generations of seed innovations for new generations of farmers. Pioneer, what's next happens here. And we're proud to continue meeting that next generation of agricultural leaders. This week, it's Clara Duncan. She serves as the state reporter for the Oklahoma FFA. Clara, thanks for joining us this week.
Thank you so much for having me today.
If you would, tell us a little bit about the ag around Chickasha, Oklahoma.
So actually, I believe my teammate Kylie talked a little bit last week. We're both from the southwest area of the state, and so a lot of that is similar. But I do have a few cotton producers actually out around where I live. One is right down the road from me. He produces cotton and peanuts and has a rotation of that, and I believe corn as well. And then we also have cattle and wheat, which is very common for the southwest area of the state.
Absolutely. And of course, now you are serving in FFA leadership. And I'm curious, Clara, what was it that made you want to be a part of the FFA?
So the biggest thing for me was my uncle is actually an ag teacher in Indianola, Oklahoma. And he kind of prompted me to join the FFA my freshman year. And I didn't really know how involved I was going to be. But as soon as I did my first opening and closing ceremonies contest, I knew that's where I needed to be. And I was excited to jump in and be very involved.
And what sort of leadership opportunities did you have a chance to take advantage of in FFA?
So I was able to actually be a chapter officer for 2 years in high school. And so as a vice president, my junior year and my senior year, I was able to be the president. And along with that, I was able to just kind of communicate with the members in my chapter, hopefully get them involved, and just encourage them to do what they can when they have the time in their jacket.
All right. And of course, planning for the future, Clara, do you hope to make agriculture your career looking down the line?
Yes, so actually I'm a freshman at Oklahoma State University right now, and I'm studying agricultural communications. I'm not exactly sure what that looks like right now. I have considered ag education as well, but for sure having agriculture be somewhere in my career.
Fantastic. Well, agriculture needs good young minds coming up. Clara, we wish you the best of luck. Thanks so much for talking with us this week.
Thank you so much for having me.
Last Monday, for the first time this growing season, the USDA started including harvest data on their weekly crop progress update. And as of a week ago, the U.S. corn crop was about 5% harvested, with growers across the Corn Belt just starting to nose their combines into those cornfields. Chad Colby caught a couple Illinois growers out this past week starting work on that corn. But that means 95% of the corn crop hasn't yet come out, and weather will determine the speed at which that happens. Joining us now is meteorologist Greg Solier with a fall weather outlook. And Greg, what do you expect to see in this next month?
Still, El Nino into high overdrive. Certainly in the short term, some pretty good progress. And over the next month or so, I think we'll still get some good harvest numbers, progress out there. 35 to 40% mature on corn and beans at the current time. Most of that really has been hastened and showing up in the western sections here, coming off the heat and dry time of this past summertime season. Nonetheless, some cool air once in a while will make its presence felt. Big sky country, northern plains, upper Midwest, to the Canadian prairie, and still some late season warm for the eastern states, down through the Delta, southwestern reaches of the country. Temps will tend to vary or be about normal in this particular part of the country. The storm track here, and for some, this is good news. Others, will lead to some harvest delays. Yes, and the tropics are still active, by the way, over the western Atlantic, but moving out to sea. Nonetheless, Pacific Northwest, good news. Big sky country, above average moisture. Southern Canadian prairie, probably the season's first snows continue on there, and for the sections of the Northeast and New England as well. But look at the expanse of western and southern Corn Belt locales, normal or below on precipitation. Not good news here over the south end of winter wheat and the desert Southwest as well. So again, manageable and workable as we go through mid-October.
All right, that'll take us to mid-October. Greg, how do things look from mid-October through about Thanksgiving?
Some of that cool and cold air kind of rotates north and eastward up towards Hudson Bay, James Bay. Readings back to average or normal throughout much of the Corn Belt, both east and west. And it'll mean probably average or normal frost and freeze states too. The warmth over Texas up to the Ohio Valley, back down through Florida. Another ribbon here across our parts of the west and Pacific Northwest. And again, it's more of a northwest to southeast, almost zonal flow. So nothing getting out of control. We don't have the big buckles, the U-shaped configurations to the jet stream pattern. Things just kind of ride and glide along. Good news with moisture in the Pacific Northwest, Canadian border, upper Midwest. Still a pretty good area of Plain States areas that are probably some worsening drought conditions, but favorable harvest here across much of the Corn Belt. Wet weather continues on with maybe a tropical system or two over sections of the southeastern portions of the country.
All right, Greg. Well, now let's take us to the end of the year. From Thanksgiving through Christmas, how do things shake out?
Hopefully trying to keep Mama happy, because you don't want to be in the combine at Thanksgiving, and I don't think you will here. And look at how we've kind of really reversed roles here. Cool weather over this part of the country, warm ridging. It's El Nino. This is a typical setup here. Above average temperatures for much of the northern and eastern Corn Belt, northern plains to the eastern states, and readings as well a bit above average across the Pacific Northwest. Precipitation-wise, this is why don't push it. Safety first. We'll get it done soon enough here. Precip below average for the northern plains, upper Midwestern reaches of the country, and a typical El Nino setup of wet weather over the southern states.
Lots to watch from a forecast perspective, Greg. It doesn't look like this year is going to end quietly, huh?
Going to be an active one here early on, but again, El Nino still into high overdrive.
El Nino is going to be setting the table. Well, as always, Greg Solier, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your expertise weekly here on This Week in Agribusiness.
Thank you.
And folks, tune in next time. We will be back here, same place, same time for more This Week in Agribusiness. Stay safe out there.
This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Case IH. This Week in Agribusiness is produced by Omax Communications in association with 22 Creative Group. We invite you to visit us online at agbizweek.com.